you know?
One thing I'll say about the time that the movie was filmed, it was pretty rough time economically for the U.S. and for that region in particular. Martha's Vineyard was not doing well. So Murray Hamilton, as we always say, people have a proclivity of wanting to do the right thing and not accepting reality. It happens in the business world all the time. You're faced with something and it's going to be impactful and bad, but you just don't want to believe it. So you keep pushing the envelope. And, in that respect, Mayor Vaughn is a very tragic character, right? He's trying to keep people off welfare. He's trying to keep the things open. And yet he's trying to, dismiss the danger as much as he can. The first one, well, it's more like a boating accident. The second time, well, we caught the shark, and that whole aspect of his character, I thought was, pretty powerful, because it was very, very different the way he was portrayed in the book. But Maury Hamilton was perfectly cast as the mayor, a very believable character. And again, not villainous, but just somebody who doesn't want to see what's in front of him. And the frustration, obviously, with the play with Matt Hooper and Roy Scheider, just phenomenal. God, there's so many different aspects you could go when you talk about these things. But I think the other big successful piece of Jaws was this wasn't one of Spielberg's storyboarded movies that he's famous for, where everything is planned. This was a film that he had to make on the fly. This was a film that him and Carl Gottlieb were rewriting as they went. The whole Indianapolis story. I mean, there's so many people taking credit for writing it, whether it was Robert Charr himself, Howard Sackler, Spielberg says he had something to do with it. Whoever had anything to do with it, was a huge collaboration, and it was probably the most powerful scene in the movie, and it was wonderful, and it brought light to a real event. Again, Jaws kept pulling you back into something that, in theory, could actually occur. Unlikely, but possible.
I mean, that's the best scene in the movie, right? Do we all agree? Or do you have... I mean, that's my favorite scene. I think it's the best scene in the movie. One of the best scenes in movies is the three of them comparing their scars, and which leads into Quint's monologue about the Indianapolis. What do you guys think of that scene?
I think it's absolutely fantastic as well. I mean, the tension that's in there and the way that Shaw captivates you while telling that story, like, I couldn't imagine any other actor in that role. He's so perfect. The accent that he's got, the way that he's telling the story, and you can see that he's reliving the event as he's telling the story.
The Indianapolis story had just recently been declassified. It was not like, we all heard of Pearl Harbor. We know of a lot of Midway. We know of a lot of battles and things that happened in the South Pacific. But the story of the Indianapolis was very, very new to a lot of people. So the audience had never heard it before. So in a sense, Robert Shaw and the cast of Jaws, Steven Spielberg, were giving a history lesson and an eye-opening to an event very, very few people even knew happened. And from that, there was books written about the Indianapolis. There was, a lot of talk about Captain McVeigh. He was the first Navy captain ever to be court-martialed for losing a ship in war. He was exonerated. I don't know if you know a lot about him, but he wound up committing suicide over the whole event many years later here in Connecticut. But just, again, that's another important piece of this movie that people don't realize. People know the Indianapolis story now, but Jaws gave it breath, life, an understanding of what those sailors actually 100% went through during that whole tragedy.
I think what a lot of franchises, right, miss the point of is, okay, Jaws, right? It's a movie about a killer shark, and that's your elevator pitch. Killer shark terrorizes a small town. That's your elevator pitch for Jaws. But the movie is not about the shark. It's about the people, right? And so, like, the movie is successful because the world and the people who inhabit that world and those characters they're what draw you into this story, and they would sell you. They're what keep your attention, and their interplay and their non-contrived conflicts, right? Because everyone has their own agenda, but nothing is contrived. You have the scientist guy who wants to study this stuff. You have the Quint, obviously he's had a lot of life experience with sharks, and he still carries that with him. You have Brody, who just wants to keep people safe. You have the mayor who wants to keep the beach open for economic reasons. You understand why these people's goals conflict with each other and how their personalities clash and all that. That's so great to watch. So the mistake of, other franchises in this franchise as we go forward, right? It's like they make it just, the killer shark attacks people. It's not about the shark. The Predator franchise is not about the Predator, right? The Alien franchise is not about the alien xenomorph. It's about those characters. It's about Dutch and those commandos in the jungle. It's about Ripley on that spaceship, right? Jaws is about Brody, Quint, and Hooper on that ship looking for the shark, right? And that's the story. And when you're like, well, that story's over, we can still have killer sharks coming, and that's why it's diminishing returns with these franchises. So you get back to these characters, and these guys are like, they're great archetypes of characters. And I did want to ask you guys, like, what's your take on Quint, right? Because he does die at the end, and he kind of, because he dies in such a horrible way, like that's his worst nightmare. He doesn't want to wear a life jacket because he would rather drown than get eaten by a shark, right? But that's of course the way he dies, and that's why you feel, not only is it gruesome, but you feel so bad for the guy because that was his worst nightmare. But he did kind of screw them over in that scene where he just keeps pushing the boat and they pushes it too far and the engine burns out. And so I want to ask you guys, what is the deal with Quint? He's basically like Captain Ahab, right? And the shark is his white whale because of this Indianapolis experience, and that's why he's just cracked. And because if he hadn't pushed the boat too far, they might have still had a chance. So what's you guys take on that?
Well, first I just want to say that the shark is his great white whale.
There it is. Very good.
I don't know. I don't feel sorry for him when he dies personally because of it's just something to amp the tension up at the end. Like they're in a position where there's like no escape. The boat's sinking and everything like this. I don't feel sorry for him because he put them in that situation by pushing the boat too hard, by destroying the radio, and he got to the point where he's single-mindedly out to kill this shark, and that's all. And I don't think it's and it's not about the money anymore. It's about he's got this single-handed mission to destroy this shark.
I think he's plagued with survivor's guilt, and like a lot of people that have that, they become obsessive. So there's roughly 800 to 1,000 people that were killed in the Indianapolis. You saw all the jaws on in his house, all over the place. He's
right.
A shark hunter. He's got the jaws actually on his boat. So you kind of understand where he's coming from, right? I mean, he is facing his fear each and every day. He makes a life on the sea. He was a sailor on a very tragic ship, and so I mean, I completely got that character. I think once that Indianapolis scene was given, it was clear as a bell as to why he is what he is. They didn't talk about PTSD much in 1974 and 75, but shell-shocked was a pretty common thing. And I think that you hit it on the head, Zach, when you started talking about the three characters. They're so unique and so believable. That's the thing. The old New England fisherman with that crazy past. You've got the scientist who's, come on, darling, she's beautiful, loving every minute of it. You can't wait to see this shark. Roy Scheider, who's deathly afraid of the water, which I love that whole aspect about his personality. I mean, how do you come up with that, right? It's only an island if you look at it from the water, right? And just the whole, that makes a lot of sense. Their dialogue amongst them was just so well written. I mean, Gottlieb did a lot of that, like I said, on the fly, and they captured it so perfectly, right? There may not have been a tandem like that. And I'm trying to think of another movie where there's three mains where the personalities are so different, but yet you care about them. One's pushing the other. You've got the whole college boy versus working class hero. You've got every aspect of this thing. So well done. It's incredible. And Quint's character, if you've been to Gloucester, if you've been to New Bedford here in New England, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, not so much anymore. But back when I was growing up, that's what you saw. I mean, fishermen, they're the toughest, most rugged people in the world. I mean, you watch the Deadliest Catch. If you want to understand the breed and what it takes, the work ethic, life on the sea is not easy. And I'm telling you, I know it was Craig Kingsbury that he used, Ben Gardner as a role model. We used the perfect one because he came off beautifully. And so his death, although it was gory, was poetic. And I was very, very sad that he died. I did not want him to die at all. I didn't want any of them to die. But his death made the most sense.
I mean, I know that we talk about Star Trek all the time, right? But the only comparison I could make was like a Kirk, Spock, McCoy kind of triangular relationship between these three people. I can't think of another, as you said, Ken, like a movie or franchise or story with three lead characters like that.
But they're not even in the same league as the characters in Jaws. They're not. Yeah. They're not.
No.
And we love Star Trek, but you're right.
They're not. They've never had that. And but hey, in my opinion, there hasn't been a movie made yet that has that chemistry that well put together. It just doesn't exist. And I know I'm very biased in that, but I'm also not alone in that.
Well, they carry the last third of the movie, right? That great shot where the orca takes off and we goes through the mouth of the jaws in Quint's house, and we go through it, and that's us entering into the third act. And it's only them. We don't cut back to anything, right? But those characters and those relationships are so great, you're not bored. You want to see what happens next. You're completely engaged for the last third of this film with just these three guys in a boat in the middle of nowhere looking for a shark that we barely see.
Isn't that like the Gilligan's Island shot, like when that boat takes off? Like
a 3-hour tour.
Yeah, well, the other aspect too is when they're heading out to sea and it's just them. One of the things that Spielberg was very careful to do was to film it so that you never saw land until they came in, a lot closer. So he really wanted to project, and very successfully, I think he pulled it off, where it's three of them against nature, and they're completely alone and isolated. And it actually, in the summertime in New England, there's boats everywhere. And so I know there was a lot of interruption of shots. But when you think about that shot, through the open jaws of that window as they're going out there, lay it on top of John Williams' music, that dun 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 dun. It was very ominous, and it was like they're heading out. This is it. And once they're going down the harbor, the music immediately switches, and it's a little bit more light, and people are waving goodbye, and and you hear Quint's voice, telling all these tales and making all these crazy orders and stuff like that. It's just, man, it was so well done. It just was just perfectly shot.
One of there's a couple things that I really like about Hooper's character, and one of them is, and I wish so many things would do this more, so many movies would do this more, and it's the throwaway line that can get rid of any questions that you have about anything. And to me, this movie has one of the greatest throwaway lines in movie history. And it's when they're out on the boat and Hooper at the beginning, and Hooper's showing off all his equipment, and they're searching for, I think it's Ben Gardner's boat at the time. And Roy Scheider's character just asks him, "What, are you rich?" And Hooper's like, "Yeah, I've got a lot of money." And it's like, it just explains everything, that the fact that he has all this stuff that's completely implausible for an average person to have. But if you're independently wealthy and you've got the money and this is what you want to do, then that's what you're going to spend your money on. So it's such a minor thing, but I love that line so much because it's just this throwaway line that explains so much. Mm-hmm. And like, this guy is so interested in it, and you talk about the characters and like filling up the screen, the interaction that he has when he's measuring the mouth of that one shark that they caught, and the interaction that he has with the locals, and they're like, what do you mean this isn't a man-eater? Look, stick your head in there. And it's like, that's such a believable thing for those characters, and he's like, look, this is probably the shark, but don't you want to be sure? So like, even there, the guy's like, this shark's not common. This shouldn't be here, but you know what? It's probably not the shark. So, or it probably is the shark, but we want to be sure. And then they find out that it's not. So I don't know. I really like his character, and I think he's kind of the shining light in the film for me. He's probably my favorite of the three characters. Just because of who he is, when he sits down for the dinner and he's like,